Hello, my name is Thomas Hartman, and I am talking about the effects of U.S. imperialism. And this is History G175. So, U.S. imperialism encompassed a lot of the world, and there are 7 main places that I have categorized where U.S. has reached out their influence and ultimately controlled their economy, controlled the people, controlled the labor, just controlled a majority of the things happening in those regions. And these regions include Hawaii, Latin America, including the Panama Canal, and other places in Latin America controlled by the United Fruit Company, Puerto Rico, China, the Philippines, Guam, and the Mariana Islands. The U.S. primarily engaged in imperialism and foreign affairs for purely their own benefit at the expense of the native people. In Hawaii, American investors were attracted to Hawaii for the climate's ideal conditions for planting sugarcane. This was by Miller. A booming sugar industry was very attractive and promoted a lucrative economy for Hawaii that was very reliant on the U.S. His involvement in their economy, and the U.S. primarily benefited from this as they would control a majority of the trade going in and coming out of Hawaii. And many plantation owners subjugated their natives to Americanization, and they also brought many Asians for the plantations. In 1853, indigenous Hawaiians made up 97% of the island's population. By 1923, their numbers had dwindled to 16%, and the largest percentage of Hawaii's population was Japanese. Hawaii, life in a plantation. So as you can see, these plantation owners that came from the U.S. are really starting to dig their roots into Hawaii and just kind of destroy the culture of the native Hawaiians, and are just like subjugated, like moving in whoever they feel necessary to try to make as big as a profit as possible. And this really shows the capitalistic, greedy mentality that a lot of people had from the US. And Queen Liliuokalani, Hawaii's last monarch, took the opposite track from her forefathers. She is known to this day for her attempts to restore Hawaiian culture and traditions, as well as restore power to the throne by crown. The annexation of the Hawaiian kingdom came as a result of the United States' constant thirst for power. So this is just showing how the minority of people from the U.S., the plantation owners, how they had so much power rooted in the region of Hawaii, that they just wanted to even more control the politics in the region for their own benefit. So they, after the Hawaiian queen wanted to go back on foreign affairs and try to restore Hawaiian culture, plantation owners saw this as a threat, so they wanted her to cede from her own throne. The mass immigration of Japanese and other people of Asian heritage, in addition to the already existing natives, would later lead to U.S. attempting to sway third world countries with this inclusive culture. So basically, after plantation owners prompted many people of Asian heritage to move to Hawaii for their plantations, there is a sense of diversity among the people, but it's not like that. It's diversity, but it's not great because it was all derived for the purpose of their plantations, and the U.S. would try to capitalize on this diversity, heavy air quotes, because it's not the best kind of diversity, but because a lot of third world countries were not convinced to join the U.S. because they'd seen a lot of discriminatory practices, but the U.S. tried to sway them with this inclusive culture. And homelessness is a serious problem among Native Americans. 1/3 of homeless population is Native Hawaiian, and this is in Hawaii. 1/3 of the homeless population is Native Hawaiian. That really goes to show how a majority of the homelessness is Native Hawaiian. It's the very people who own the land that are getting kicked out of their own homes. In Latin America, Panama is of paramount importance to the United States. With its canal, the isthmus connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean for all maritime traffic, including military vessels. Moreover, control over the canal means control over said traffic, as well as the movement of goods and people that come through it. Still, Panama was first helped by the United States to gain independence. Then construction of the canal ensued with the intent of U.S. gaining mass profits and keeping a grip on a major source of power. The canal interested America and the United Kingdom, but United Kingdom later signed the Treaty of Hay-Pauncefote, which allowed for the U.S. to construct the canal, and the UK stayed out of it because they wanted to get better affairs with the United States, because they weren't in the best relationship, so they wanted to, in a sense, appease America. The United Fruit Company was a major source of power and influence on Latin America from the United States. The United Fruit Company created an unchecked system that stripped Latin America resources and redistributed them into Western markets. The United Fruit Company also gained control in the regions that they planted primarily bananas by replacing governments and replacing them with ones that would favor the fruit company in return for money. Yeah, these fruit companies have seeded a lot of corruption in the Latin American region, which is very bad. And I mean, their company ultimately collapsed after a disease because there was very little biodiversity within the bananas that they were planting. So one disease struck all of them, and they all died. Guam and the Mariana Islands. The U.S. treated Guam and its indigenous people, Caramos, as objects owned by the U.S., American-style colonialism. The U.S. primarily used these islands to further advance closer to the Philippines and to China to gain an even greater trade influence. America missed out on the sprawl for Africa, so they saw this as a perfect opportunity to not miss out on another chance on gaining a huge influence on China and in the Asian Pacific. The U.S. was also interested in these territories for military and economic purposes. So the U.S. wanted to establish military bases on many of these islands, and yeah, they're primarily islands. They wanted to have military bases for refueling their newly acquired ships and refueling for their airplanes. I mean, airplanes weren't yet achieved, but after World War One, these bases would prove influential, or not influential, but they would be like they were needed for victory, and they wanted because they benefited from the trade that these islands provided them. As stated earlier, the people of Guam were treated as objects, and this further contributed to the fact that a colonial relationship is not an equal relationship, and without equality, there can be no freedom. By Guam, an island like no other. The Philippines. The main purpose of colonization of the Philippines was to serve as a military base point and a place that the U.S. owned that was close to China, so they could gain an influence in China's lucrative markets. After urging me to resume hostilities against Spaniards, he assured me that the United States would grant much greater liberty and more material benefits to the Filipinos than the Spaniards ever promised. Aguinaldo. Vain indeed became these hope when this news arrived that Admiral Dewey had acted and was continuing to act against the revolutionary government. After all that the Americans and Filipinos had gone through, the U.S. still resorted to their greedy style of thinking, completely abandoning their friendly relations with the Filipinos. So, in this article, Aguinaldo is basically he is the Philippines president, and he's working with the American troops to push out the Spaniards, the Spanish. They're trying to establish independence, and the U.S. is promising him that they will soon establish independence, and that he shouldn't worry, because there is no question as to whether the U.S. will not recognize them as an independent nation. But after the Spaniards are pushed out of the Philippines, it proves that the U.S. go back to their old ideology that they must control everything, and they backstab the Filipinos, and they start going against the Filipino Revolutionary Force. And the Filipinos can't really do anything because they are already so exhausted, and they've already used so much of their resources. It's just they can't fight back. In China provided the U.S. with a massively lucrative market. The open door policy mandated that China stay open for the influence of Western powers like America, Britain, France, Germany, Denmark, places like that. Although they held a meeting of China's trade policies for the open door policy, China wasn't even invited to this meeting, meaning that like they don't even care about the opinion of the Chinese. Like they couldn't even invite the Chinese. Even they probably would have disagreed. Like Chinese definitely would have disagreed with the policy, their open door policy, but they didn't even let them have any representation, which is pretty cool. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day, evening, night, whatever time. Goodbye.